The fluorescent lights of Gallagher and Associates law firm buzzed overhead as Sarah Martinez pushed her cleaning cart down the marble hallway. It was 11 p.m. on a Thursday, and the building was finally empty, or so she thought. Her worn sneakers squeaked against the polished floor as she made her way to the executive suite on the 15th floor. Sarah was 32 but looked older. The lines around her eyes told stories of sleepless nights and double shifts. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her blue cleaning uniform hung loosely on her thin frame. She had been working at the firm for 3 years, always arriving after everyone left, invisible to the people whose offices she cleaned. She pulled out her phone to check the time. Her daughter Emma would be asleep by now at her neighbor Mrs. Chen's apartment. The babysitter cost $15 an hour, money Sarah could barely afford, but she had no choice. Emma was only 7 years old, too young to be left alone while her mother scrubbed toilets and emptied trash cans in downtown Chicago. As Sarah entered the main conference room, she noticed the lights were still on in the corner office, the one belonging to Richard Gallagher III, the senior partner. She felt her stomach tighten. The partners usually left by 7. She hoped he wouldn't notice her, but Richard noticed everything. He stepped out of his office, his expensive Italian shoes clicking against the marble. He was in his mid-50s, with silver hair perfectly styled and a suit that probably cost more than Sarah made in 3 months. His cold blue eyes swept over her with the kind of look reserved for things beneath notice. Sarah lowered her gaze and moved her cart to the side. Just be invisible, she told herself. Finish the job and go home. But Richard walked directly toward her, stopping just a few feet away. He wrinkled his nose as if he smelled something unpleasant. "You're the cleaning woman, right?" he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Yes, sir. Sarah Martinez. I'll stay out of your way. See that you do." Richard crossed his arms. "And tell your supervisor that the bathrooms on this floor weren't properly cleaned yesterday. I don't pay premium prices for mediocre service." Sarah felt her face burn. She had cleaned those bathrooms herself, spending extra time on every surface. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll make sure everything is perfect tonight." Richard smirked. "People like you always say that. You know what the problem is? No standards, no education, no ambition, just going through the motions." Sarah's hands gripped the handle of her cart, her knuckles turning white. She wanted to tell him about her associate degree in accounting, about how she used to work at a bank before her husband died and medical bills drowned her. She wanted to tell him about the online courses she took at midnight to finish her bachelor's degree, about her daughter who made honor roll despite everything. But she said nothing. She needed this job. Richard checked his Rolex. "I have clients arriving in 10 minutes. Make yourself scarce. Actually, use the service elevator. I don't want them seeing the help in the main lobby." Something inside Sarah cracked. "With all due respect, sir, I am not ashamed of my work. I support my daughter with honest labor." Richard's face darkened. "Respect? You think you can talk to me about respect? You're just a cleaner, a nobody. You should be grateful you're even allowed in this building." The elevator chimed at the end of the hall. 3 men stepped out, not the typical lawyers or clients Sarah had seen before. They wore leather vests over denim, heavy boots, and silver chains. The patches on their vests read, "Hell's Angels MC," with the distinctive winged death head logo. Their presence changed the atmosphere immediately, like a storm rolling in. Richard's confidence faltered for just a moment, but he recovered quickly, squaring his shoulders. "The hallway is closed for private meetings," he announced. "You'll need to leave." The man in front was massive, 6'4" with a gray beard and arms covered in tattoos. His eyes, however, were sharp and intelligent. He looked past Richard and stopped cold when he saw Sarah. "Sarah?" His voice was rough but filled with shock. Sarah's cart slipped from her hands, cleaning supplies clattering to the floor. "Tommy?" The big man's face broke into a huge grin. He pushed past Richard without a second glance and strode toward Sarah, followed by his 2 companions. Before she could react, he pulled her into a gentle bear hug. "I've been looking for you for 2 years," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Why didn't you call? We're family." Richard stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, watching the scene unfold with complete confusion. Sarah pulled back, tears streaming down her face. I couldn't. After David died, I didn't want to be a burden on anyone. A burden? Tommy shook his head. David was our brother. That makes you our sister. Always has, always will. Richard cleared his throat loudly, his face reddening with anger and confusion. Excuse me, but I need to ask you people to leave. This is a private law firm, not a motorcycle clubhouse. Tommy turned slowly, his expression hardening. He kept one protective arm around Sarah's shoulders. And you are? Richard Gallagher III, senior partner. I own this firm. He gestured dismissively toward Sarah. And this woman works for me. She's supposed to be cleaning, not socializing. Sarah felt herself shrinking, the old shame creeping back. Tommy felt her tense and pulled her closer. Works for you? Tommy's voice dropped to a dangerous rumble. How exactly do you treat your employees, Mr. Gallagher? With the professionalism they deserve, Richard snapped. Now if you'll excuse me, I have actual important business to attend to. Sarah whispered, Tommy, please. I can't lose this job. Emma needs. What did he say to you? Tommy interrupted gently, looking down at her. Before we arrived. What did he say? Sarah hesitated, but Tommy's two companions had moved closer, their presence silent but imposing. The shorter one with the scarred face spoke up in a surprisingly soft voice. We heard him through the elevator doors. Called her a nobody. Said she should be grateful. Richard's confidence was cracking. Look, I don't know what kind of intimidation tactic this is, but I'll call security. I'll call the police. Go ahead, Tommy said calmly. Call them. Let's talk about labor laws, about workplace harassment, about dignity and respect. My brothers and I, we've got nothing but time tonight. Richard pulled out his phone, but his hands were shaking slightly. You're threatening me? In my own building? Nobody's threatening anyone, the third man said, his voice carrying a thick Brooklyn accent. We're just having a conversation about how our sister is being treated at her workplace. That's legal, ain't it? Sarah felt the weight of 3 years pressing down on her. 3 years of swallowing insults, of working 12-hour shifts, of scrubbing floors while her body screamed in pain. 3 years of being invisible, of being less than human to people like Richard. She had endured it all because Emma needed food, needed clothes, needed a roof over her head. Because society told her that survival was more important than dignity. Because she believed she had no choice. But now, standing in that hallway with Tommy's arm around her, something shifted. The little girl who grew up around bikers, who learned about loyalty and brotherhood before she learned algebra, began to remember who she was before grief and poverty had beaten her down. Mr. Gallagher, she said quietly, her voice steadier than before. Quit. Richard laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. You quit? You think you can just walk away? Good luck finding another job without a reference. Good luck explaining to your daughter why you chose pride over providing for her. The words hit their mark. Sarah's newfound courage wavered. Tommy's grip on Sarah's shoulder tightened, not in aggression, but in reassurance. He looked Richard dead in the eye with the kind of calm that only truly dangerous men possess. Reference? Tommy said slowly. Let me tell you something about references, Mr. Gallagher. Sarah here has a degree in accounting. She graduated top of her class before life knocked her down. She's been taking night courses to finish her bachelor's while working 2 jobs and raising a kid alone. That's the kind of employee people dream of having. Richard scoffed. A degree? From where? Community college. That's adorable. University of Illinois, Sarah said quietly, finding her voice again. I was 3 semesters away from my CPA certification when my husband got sick. Tommy pulled out his phone. Marcus, he said into the speaker. Yeah, it's me. Remember that accounting position we've been trying to fill at the garage? The one handling the books for all 6 locations? A voice crackled through. The $70,000 a year one? Yeah, still open. Can't find anyone trustworthy. I found someone, Tommy said, his eyes never leaving Richard's face. Family. She starts Monday if she wants it. Sarah's breath caught. Tommy, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. David made me promise to look after you and Emma if anything happened to him. I failed you for 2 years, but I'm not failing you anymore. Richard's face had gone from red to pale. He looked between Tommy and Sarah, realizing the power dynamic had shifted completely. Now wait just a minute. Let's not be hasty here. Perhaps I was too harsh. Stress, you understand. Long hours. We can forget this whole incident. Forget? The scarred biker laughed without humor. Forget you called her a nobody? Forget you tried to make her feel worthless? Tommy held up a hand, silencing his companion. He turned to Sarah. This is your call, sis. You want an apology from this man, you'll get one. You want to walk out that door and never look back, we walk with you. Whatever you need. Sarah looked at Richard, really looked at him for the first time. She saw past the expensive suit and the fancy office. She saw a small man who built himself up by tearing others down, who measured worth in dollar signs and job titles. And she realized she didn't need his apology. She didn't need his validation or his reference. I choose me, she said firmly. I choose my daughter. I choose people who see my worth. She turned to Tommy. If that job offer is real, I accept. Real as it gets, Tommy grinned. You'll handle accounting for the motorcycle shop, the custom paint business, and our 4 auto repair locations. Benefits, retirement plan, the whole deal. And Emma's college fund starts tomorrow. If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible, ever been told you're not enough, stick around. Because what happens next proves that the right people will always see your value, even when the world tries to convince you you're worthless. Richard's phone buzzed in his hand. He glanced at the screen and his face went white. Gentlemen, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Perhaps we can discuss this in my office over drinks. Tommy shook his head. No misunderstanding. You showed your true colors. We're done here. But as they turned to leave, the elevator doors opened again. A woman in her 60s stepped out, her silver hair cut short, wearing a leather jacket over a business suit. The patch on her jacket read, Club Attorney. Tommy, she called out. Got your message. I was in the building anyway for the Patterson deposition. Richard's eyes widened in recognition. Margaret Chen. You're their attorney? Margaret walked past him without acknowledgement, going straight to Sarah. I'm Margaret. Tommy tells me you might need legal representation for a hostile work environment claim. Sarah blinked in surprise. I don't know if I can afford. Pro bono, Margaret interrupted with a warm smile. Family rate. Now, did anyone record what was said here tonight? The scarred biker held up his phone. Got the whole thing. Started recording when we heard him through the elevator. Richard stepped forward, panic creeping into his voice. Now hold on. This is entrapment. Illinois is a one-party consent state, Margaret said calmly. Perfectly legal. Now, Mr. Gallagher, let's talk settlement. My client has endured 3 years of documented workplace harassment. I've already spoken with 4 other cleaning staff who are willing to testify about the toxic environment in this firm. There's no harassment, Richard sputtered. She's being dramatic. Overly sensitive. Margaret pulled out a tablet. I have emails here where you referred to the cleaning staff as bottom feeders. Text messages to your assistant about keeping the help out of sight when clients visit. Security footage from last month where you threw a coffee cup at a janitor for being in your way. Richard's lawyer facade crumbled. He looked around desperately, realizing he was trapped. What do you want? Margaret looked at Sarah. What do you want? Sarah thought about Emma, about the years of struggling, about every time she'd swallowed her pride to keep food on the table. She thought about the other cleaners who worked in silence, afraid to speak up. I want a formal apology, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. Written and verbal. I want compensation for the hostile work environment. And I want you to implement mandatory respect and dignity training for all partners and associates in this firm. Margaret smiled. And a reference letter. Glowing. Dated from 3 years ago. Richard looked like he might be sick. Fine. Whatever you want. Just make this go away. Tommy crossed his arms. Not good enough. Apologize to her. Right now. Look her in the eye. Richard's jaw clenched, but he met Sarah's gaze. I apologize for my unprofessional behavior and disrespectful words. Sarah stood taller. Apology accepted. Now we're done. The settlement came through 2 weeks later. Sarah sat in Margaret's office, staring at the check in her hands. $50,000 for emotional distress and back wages that should have included hazard pay and overtime. It was more money than she had seen since before David's medical bills consumed everything. Margaret slid another document across the desk. And here's the reference letter. Backdated as promised. It says you were an exemplary employee who left to pursue better opportunities. He didn't want to write it, but my persuasion skills are excellent. Sarah laughed. A real laugh that felt foreign after so many years. Thank you doesn't seem like enough. Then don't thank me. Pass it forward when you can. Margaret leaned back in her chair. Tommy tells me you start at the garage Monday. Nervous? Terrified, Sarah admitted. I haven't done real accounting work in years. What if I mess up? You won't, Margaret said firmly. And even if you stumble, you've got a whole family ready to catch you. That's what we do. The word family caught in Sarah's throat. She had spent 2 years isolating herself after David's death, convinced she was a burden, convinced that grief was something to carry alone. She had forgotten that the men and women in those leather vests had shown up to David's funeral, had tried to help, had left voicemails and sent cards that she never answered. Monday morning arrived cold and crisp. Sarah dropped Emma off at school. A better school now, in a safer neighborhood, thanks to the new apartment Tommy had helped her find. Emma kissed her cheek before running to join her friends, her backpack bouncing. The motorcycle shop sat on the corner of 5th and Madison, a massive building with gleaming bikes in the showroom and the sound of engines rumbling from the garage bays. Sarah took a deep breath and walked inside. The office was upstairs, surprisingly modern and organized. A desk waited for her with a new computer, office supplies, and a framed photo of Emma that Tommy must have taken from her apartment. Her first day was overwhelming. 6 locations meant 6 sets of books, hundreds of invoices, payroll for 47 employees. But as Sarah dove into the numbers, something awakened inside her. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She caught discrepancies, reorganized filing systems, found ways to save money on insurance and supplier contracts. By the end of the week, Tommy stood in her office doorway, shaking his head in amazement. You found $15,000 in overcharges from our parts supplier. In 5 days. Sarah shrugged, but couldn't hide her smile. Just doing my job. No, Tommy said seriously. You're doing what you were meant to do. David always said you were brilliant with numbers. He'd be so proud of you right now. Tears pricked Sarah's eyes, but they were different tears now. Not tears of exhaustion or shame, but of healing. I'm proud of me too, she whispered. Tommy grinned. Good, because next month we're expanding, and you're getting a raise. 2 years later, Sarah stood in front of a mirror, adjusting her leather vest. The patch on the back read, Hell's Angels MC, honorary member, with smaller text underneath, Family Forever. Emma, now 9 years old, bounced excitedly beside her. Mom, you look so cool. Can I get a jacket too when I'm older? Sarah laughed, ruffling her daughter's hair. We'll see. Right now, focus on that math scholarship you just won. The clubhouse was packed for the annual family barbecue. Sarah had organized the entire event, managing the budget, coordinating vendors, and somehow making sure everything ran smoothly. It was a far cry from pushing a cleaning cart through empty office buildings. Tommy found her in the crowd, pulling her aside. Got something to show you. He handed her a folder. Inside was a business proposal. Sarah Martinez, Chief Financial Officer. Below it, plans for expanding the motorcycle business into 3 new states, complete with financial projections, risk assessments, and growth strategies. Tommy, this is... Sarah's voice caught. This is a 6-figure position. You earned it. In 2 years, you've tripled our profit margins, negotiated better contracts than I thought possible, and kept every single location running like clockwork. Plus, you just got your CPA certification last month. He paused, his expression softening. David would lose his mind with pride if he could see you now. Sarah looked around at the gathered family, blood and chosen. Margaret was arguing good-naturedly with another lawyer over a case. The scarred biker, whose name was Jake, was teaching Emma how to play chess. Dozens of people who had welcomed her back without judgment, who had lifted her up when she couldn't stand on her own. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Ms. Martinez, this is Jessica Moore from Gallagher and Associates. I was one of the cleaning staff. I heard what you did. Because of your settlement, they implemented new policies. They treat us like human beings now. Thank you for being brave enough to stand up. You changed lives. Sarah showed Tommy the message, tears streaming down her face. That's what real strength looks like, Tommy said quietly. Not just saving yourself, but opening doors for others to walk through. As the sun set over Chicago, Sarah watched Emma laugh with her new extended family. She thought about the woman she had been 2 years ago. Broken, invisible, convinced she deserved nothing better. And she thought about the woman she had become. Confident, valued, proof that one moment of courage could change everything. If you've watched this story all the way to the end, thank you from the bottom of my heart. If Sarah's journey touched you, hit that like button and leave a comment telling me what moment resonated most with you. Subscribe to the channel because every week, I bring you stories of real human courage, of people who refuse to stay down, of second chances and the family we choose. Drop a comment with suggestions for the next story. I read every single one. Remember, you're never just anything. You're never just a cleaner, just a server, just an employee. You're a human being with infinite worth, and the right people will always see that. Until next time, keep fighting for your dignity. You're worth it.